Sometimes, the story behind a movie is as compelling as the movie itself. Office Space, Mike Judge's 1999 cult comedy, wasn't just about cubicles, staplers, and TPS reports. It was a labor of quiet rebellion, absurd humor, and meticulous detail. From studio pushback to casting near misses, improvised performances, and the creation of iconic props, every element of the film reflects a deep understanding of corporate life and the frustrations of the everyday worker. What looks effortless on screen was actually a series of creative battles, subtle character choices, and inspired accidents. This is the story behind the movie that made Office Misery funny, relatable, and unforgettable. The title, The Studio Hated. Sometimes the smallest creative choices spark the biggest battles. In the 1999 cult comedy Office Space, writer-director Mike Judge faced pushback over something as simple as the title. The studio thought Office Space sounded dull, forgettable, and about as exciting as a fax machine manual. Executives at Fox pitched alternative names with more flash, hoping for another There's Something About Mary-style hook. Judge refused. The blandness was the point. It captured the lifeless, beige soul of the corporate world he was mocking. Instead of embracing that vision, the studio slashed the ad budget, cancelled press screenings, and, according to some insiders, quietly buried the film. For Judge, it felt like sabotage. For the movie, it was irony in action. The very mediocrity Office Space satirized ended up shaping its fate, and the studio became part of the joke. From hair gel to a stapler. Sometimes a hit opens doors for movies it has nothing in common with. In 1998, There's Something About Mary dominated the box office with crude gags, chaotic energy, and record profits. Fox, hungry for another outrageous hit, went hunting. Deep in their archives, they remembered Milton, a short, oddball cartoon Mike Judge had made for MTV, about a mumbling man and his stapler. Judge knew his idea for Office Space wasn't anything like Mary. It was slow, dry, and quietly bleak, expanded from a 90-second gag into a feature film. But in the post-Mary gold rush, Fox didn't care. If gross-out comedy could sell, then maybe a deadpan workplace satire could ride the same wave. And so, Milton got its big screen shot, not because the studio loved workplace satire, but because an R-rated rom-com about hair gel left the side door unlocked. He was quiet, obsessive, and completely real. Before he was a cartoon, before he became a mumbling legend, Milton was just a guy Mike Judge worked with in real life. Same monotone voice, same hunched-over shuffle, same eerie fixation on a red swingline stapler like it was a lifeline. Judge couldn't get him out of his head, so one night he sketched him. The result was crude, barely animated, just a handful of frames showing a sad man slowly losing his desk, losing his voice, and finally snapping in silence. It aired in 1991 on MTV's Liquid Television, that bizarre late-night showcase of surreal animation and future cult classics. Milton was small, practically background noise, but something about him lodged in the brain. So much so that Saturday Night Live picked him up again and again, keeping the character alive in short, awkward bursts. There was no fanfare, no viral moment. Milton just kept showing up, ignored, pushed around, never quite disappearing. By the time Office Space was finally greenlit, Milton had already survived a decade of corporate abuse on cable. And when Stephen Root finally shuffled onto set, stapler clutched in hand, he didn't just play Milton. He embodied him. He became the ghost of every forgotten employee who's been there all along, whispering from the shadows, waiting for his cake and ready, if pushed too far, to burn the whole place down. The original Office Rebel. Some revolutions start not with a shout, but with a quiet refusal. In Office Space, Peter Gibbons' sudden refusal to play the corporate game feels oddly familiar to literary historians. In 1853, Herman Melville published Bartleby, the Scrivener, a short story about a meek office worker who simply stops working, uttering the famous line, "I would prefer not to." No protests, no chaos, just an unsettling withdrawal from the grind. While Mike Judge never claimed Bartleby as inspiration, critics quickly noticed the parallel. Both Bartleby and Peter reject their monotonous, soul-draining routines, making their silent defiance more unsettling than any loud rebellion. Separated by 2 centuries, both stories face the same enemy, the relentless machinery of the system, and reveal that sometimes the most dangerous act is simply not playing along. the man who was already over it. Sometimes the hardest role to cast is the one that feels like it's not acting at all. When Mike Judge was searching for Office Space's Peter Gibbons, he wasn't looking for charm or movie star sparkle. He needed that slow-burning, fluorescent-lit exhaustion that comes from years of quiet corporate misery. At first, the frontrunner was Louis C.K., a then unknown stand-up with razor-sharp writing chops and the perfect look of dry disappointment. On paper, it seemed ideal, but on camera, it still felt like a performance. Judge admitted he wanted Louis to work out, but the role demanded someone who was that worn down, not someone pretending to be. Enter Ron Livingston. No showmanship, no comedian's rhythm, just an authentic fatigue that couldn't be faked. He wasn't playing Peter Gibbons, he was Peter Gibbons, a man who had quietly decided he was done showing up for a job he never wanted in the first place. The voice that could ruin your day. Sometimes a villain doesn't need to shout to be terrifying. In Office Space, Bill Lumberer's weapons weren't fists or fury, but suspenders, coffee mugs, and a voice that could drain the will to live. Actor Gary Cole found that voice by imitating an old boss, slipping into the drawl between takes just to make the crew laugh. When Mike Judge heard it, he didn't chuckle. He simply said, "That's it." Cole then pushed it even further, slower, flatter, and more soul-sucking, until it became the ultimate passive-aggressive threat. What started as an inside joke turned into one of the most quietly chilling antagonists in comedy history, proving you don't have to yell to ruin someone's life. Lawrence, the neighbor who came to life. Authenticity isn't created, it's observed. In Office Space, Lawrence's mullet, sleeveless flannel, and thick Texas drawl weren't costumes. They were borrowed straight from a real person Mike Judge had encountered. Actor Diedrich Bader didn't have to invent the character. He just listened and embodied the neighbor who could talk plumbing, beer, and conspiracy theories all at once. When the real-life inspiration saw the film, he didn't feel mocked. Instead, he felt honored, because for once Hollywood laughed with him, not at him. Sometimes the most believable characters are the ones already living in the world around us. Finding Milton, the art of becoming invisible. Sometimes perfection is hiding in plain sight. During the Office Space auditions, Stephen Root struggled to capture Milton's essence, too loud, too clear, too present. The character was meant to be a mumbling shadow, barely noticed in the background. In a moment of improvisation, Root hunched, tilted his head down, and spoke to the floor rather than the people around him. Suddenly, Milton emerged, a quiet, breathy complaint, half whispered, half swallowed. Mike Judge leaned in, the casting director laughed, and just like that, the role was his. Root didn't act Milton, he folded into him, becoming the invisible everyman whose silent frustration would steal every scene without ever raising his voice. Sometimes inhabiting a role means disappearing entirely, letting the character quietly claim the screen. Jennifer Aniston's unexpected flair. Sometimes rebellion comes in polyester. During Office Space production, Fox demanded a recognizable face, pushing for star power and sex appeal that Mike Judge never intended. The film was meant to be beige, fluorescent-lit, cubicle-bound monotony, not glossy Hollywood glam. Judge reluctantly added a love interest, and Jennifer Aniston stepped in. Fresh from Friends, she was tired of playing the perfectly polished, camera-ready version of herself. Aniston embraced the opposite. No designer outfits, no studio lighting, no slow-motion glamour, just a polyester uniform and 15 pieces of office flair. She leaned into awkward silences, bad restaurant jokes, and a deliberate invisibility. Her quiet rebellion made her character unforgettable. Sometimes the most subversive performances are the ones that disappear into the mundanity everyone else overlooks. The graveyard of cubicles. Authenticity can't be faked. For Office Space, Mike Judge refused a typical studio set. Instead, the crew salvaged desks and dividers from abandoned office buildings in Dallas. Every carpet stain, every dead plant, every crooked chair came with history, a life once lived, now ghostly and inert. Actors didn't have to fake exhaustion. The space already exuded it, the stale air of coffee breath, the faint echo of broken dreams. It wasn't just a set, it was a mausoleum for mundane labor. In that authenticity, the film's satire of corporate life found its perfect, invisible co-star. The printer beatdown. Sometimes comedy is just another word for release. For Office Space, Mike Judge tapped into a lifetime of office frustration. Paper jams, blinking error codes, endless bureaucracy. He knew the silent fury lurking behind every cubicle wall. When the crew filmed the legendary printer destruction, Judge gave one simple direction: act like it ruined your life. The actors didn't need coaching. They dragged the printer into a field, cranked up Ghetto Boys, and unleashed years of pent-up 9-to-5 rage on a hapless machine. No stunt props, no safety nets, just pure catharsis. That scene wasn't just a gag, it was therapy in full swing, and it still resonates with anyone who's ever felt the soul-sucking grind of office life. The vanishing comic. Sometimes the funniest voices are the ones you barely hear. Orlando Jones, a rapid-fire comic of the 90s, arrived on Office Space fully armed, script in hand, character locked, camera rolling. He was the sarcastic, over-it office drone who could have dominated every scene. But between rewrites and the cut room, Jones's role vanished. In the final film, he appears only once, at Peter's apartment, selling magazines. One line. No setup, no punchline, no lingering presence, just a brief knock, a pitch, and silence. The irony wasn't lost. In a movie about people being erased by corporate life, even the actor who could have stolen the show became part of the joke, quietly disappearing into the beige background of the story. The hypnosis that changed everything. Sometimes a small joke becomes the soul of a story. Originally, Peter's hypnosis scene in Office Space was just a gag, a brief daydream before he returned to his beige, soul-sucking routine. But test audiences reacted differently. They didn't just chuckle, they leaned in. They wanted Peter to stay stuck. The studio noticed, and Mike Judge pivoted. The dream became canon. This simple change didn't just make the scene funnier. It crystallized the entire film. Peter's refusal to care, his passive rebellion, turned from fantasy into reality, the ultimate embodiment of every office worker's quiet, defiant dream. The TPS report that everyone hated. Sometimes the smallest details carry the heaviest weight. In Office Space, the infamous TPS reports weren't made up for laughs. They came straight from Mike Judge's own time as an engineer in Silicon Valley. Endless memos, endless meetings, endless bureaucratic nonsense. One real cover sheet kept getting forgotten, sparking minor chaos day after day. Judge remembered it all when he wrote the film, turning a mundane form into a 3-letter punchline. That simple, recognizable symbol of corporate soul-crushing bureaucracy instantly connected with anyone who had ever survived a cubicle, making the TPS report an icon of office misery. The red swing line that stole the show. Sometimes, a small detail becomes the emotional core of a story. In Office Space, Milton's iconic cherry red swingline stapler wasn't in the original script, it was just a plain black stapler. Mike Judge wanted something that would visually pop, so the props team sprayed it fire engine red. Suddenly, it wasn't just a stapler. It became Milton's heart, his soul, and the last shred of his personal power. Audiences immediately connected with it. After the film gained cult status on DVD, Swingline began receiving hundreds of requests for a red stapler. They didn't exist, so the company made them, turning a prop into a symbol of rebellion and quiet triumph.